just be quiet.
Yeah.
And let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to, unless you're able to take in the story that's being played out in front of you, you won't be able to answer any of your own questions.
Yeah.
If you just wait and just let it happen.
Watch and pay attention.
Pay attention. Yeah. And that, so I've always taken that watching and listening to the thing at present as just being like, that is part of the role that we have. And as whether we're, just Christians or trying to communicate Christian theology. Yeah. A lot of it is just about our attention being given over to
and it's gospel. Like what would separate Lessing from Isaac Newton in the way? Like Lessing is saying, I'm looking out at the stars and, he's doing the Timon balls of gas thing. And he's like, man, everything's gas for you now. Whereas Isaac Newton said, oh, no, I'm going to describe the stage, the theatre. And and realistically, you might be like, I'm probably one of the best there's ever been at that. But he's like, but I'm only doing that because I know they are talking about Jesus. Mm-hmm. And it's that sense that the earth is the viewing point to view all this. And then viewed correctly, as the Bible says, if you look at this correctly, I mean, we could even get into the whole zodiac idea that there's this way that there's like justice and all these like a story is being told, literally being told. And you might say, but that's insane because like some of the formations are stars that are not even in the same galaxies kind of thing, but represent patterns in the sky. And it's like, but it's a story where there's like a virgin and a Virgo is a virgin, and she's going to give birth to this Redeemer, and it's all being played out with the stars above us. Or even just the sun's rising. You say, listen, watch, the sun is rising. It defeats the darkness like a champion. It's like a bridegroom on the way to get married, because that's the story of the universe. And like there's this like heaven and earth, a male and female to be joined together. And the whole universe seems to be trying to say, look, do you get the story that's going on? And right in the center of history, this God actually becomes a human being. And you say, well, what would God look like if he did show up on Earth? Because some people are like, why doesn't he just set up? And you go, but imagine if he did, wouldn't he? Like, here's this guy who wanders around and he like, controls the weather, feeds the hungry, answers everybody's questions, raises the dead. The demons are scared of him. And then he says, I'm going to die and then I'll bring myself back to life. And he does. You go, well, that is kind of what I think God would look like that. Yeah. But and you say, instead of trying to say, I'm going to like focus on like abstract truth. One, what is the story that the heavens and the earth are saying? And then where has that story in fact happened? So,
and has it happened? So one of the things that you were talking to me about before we set up this conversation was it an interview with Jordan Peterson? And someone asked him about whether things in the Old Testament had happened or not, whether he thought they were historical.
Yeah, Alex O'Connor is asking him. And
So he says, like, did those things happen? And Jordan Peterson sort of fluffs. He sort of wants to jump around a little bit.
Yeah.
But for him, because he wants to stay in the abstract, and maybe this is a bit of a kind of a zodiac type thing, because he's a Jungian, so he's using these archetypal categories of the great hero myths and the stories. So he wants to keep those as like they're true. That's true out there, and every now and again, you might see an actual example of it played out in human history.
Yeah.
And probably the best example of that is when Jesus was in.
Yeah. So Jesus is an example of a cosmic archetype.
So he's not the fulfillment of.
Or even the origin of it.
Or the origin.
Yeah.
Go on. What do you mean by the origin and the fulfillment?
Well, so, I think what Jordan's doing is saying, like, there are certain... he might be saying something as big as the universe functions in a particular way and you see certain patterns occurring over and over again. And what humans have tended to do, the wise humans, is encapsulate their observed, these ways that they observe life works kind of thing, and encapsulate those in stories and archetypes and things. And so what's good about the Bible, he says, is if you mine it, you will find wisdom about these patterns that when famously he goes like the Exodus, did it happen? And he go, well, that's not so important as it always happens.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I see. So for you, it's an instance of a general pattern of humanity, like sort of thing. Yeah. And then you'll say, and Jesus is a great example, an embodiment of these archetypes, and he illustrates things that are generally true. Now, Lessing would be like, exactly. That is what Jesus is. He's on my side of the ditch. Right. There are certain things that are just true.
Right.
And Jesus is illustrative of them.
Okay.
Is an instance of them. But what the whole claim of what the Bible is about Jesus said, no, he's the origin of them. So if the universe has patterns of death and rising, and seeds die and resurrected, and the sun rises to life in this resurrection every morning and defeats the darkness of death. It does that because at the origin of it is Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah.
And the Bible makes this outrageous claim. He is this lamb slain before the foundation of the world. Like this story of Jesus of Nazareth being born, living this life, dying, being resurrected, ascending. That is prior, not like chronologically, but prior in the sense that is the origin. That story is the origin of the universe itself. So when he makes the universe, he writes that story into the universe and makes sure that the whole universe bears witness to his life. And he's like, one day I'm going to do these things, but I'm going to set the whole universe up so that it's about that. It's about that, so that it's not that he's merely an instance of something that's cosmically generally true. It's that the universe, so it's not that he's a projection of it. It is a projection of him.
Yeah.
Does that?
Yeah. No, it's so helpful, because I think a lot of the time when people are recognizing, and I would you say it's a grace of God that people can recognize that there is this story out there.
Oh yeah.
And so, but of course, in our sinfulness, we twist it and we turn it into something else. And that's why people are so nervous when we talk about myth and mythos, because they're like, oh, I know what you mean by myth. Basically, what you mean is there are these stories of, Demeter and Persephone. And it's like, it's just, it's an etiological myth. It's just because in the olden days people weren't very clever, so they didn't understand. They don't understand stuff. So they have the stories, and they're supposed to help us. Whereas when you're using the word mythos, I think, and when I'm using the word mythos, I'm meaning that the story is primary, and maybe some of the people in the kind of churches that we've been part of would feel more comfortable if we just said the gospel is primary.
Yeah.
But so do we want to...
I think we have
Why
to say
do we
more
want to differentiate between the gospel and the mythos in that?
Because the mythos is is like a framing story in which everything is. It's not just because sometimes it's okay but if you mean gospel, if you go back Anglo-Saxon, God's spell, a spell that He has cast over all creation. And what is that spell? It's the story of Jesus, and the whole creation holds together. As I was with Glenn, we touched on this idea in Hebrews. When it says Jesus is the expressed image of the Father's person, and holds everything together by His powerful word, as if He is telling the story of the universe, and that's how the universe holds together. Going back to the Aslan, C.S. Lewis, where he sings it into being, and then it's as if as he describes in song the universe, it comes to be because he's telling the story. It's as if he's saying, "This is the story of the universe," and as he tells it, it becomes. And it's as if and that's a really different thing, because it's there is a storyteller at the very center of the universe. What is the story that he's telling? So mythos means that.
Yeah.
And it means like what we tend to do, like kind of like try this on the doctrine of God. Like see how what I find nearly every doctrine of God is utterly rubbish. Like utterly rubbish. Because okay, that's going to get us in trouble. But the reason I think it's utterly rubbish, nearly everyone I ever read, is because, and that's not fair, but a lot of them, is that they are doing that mistake of trying to go, let's dig down to get to the rock.
Okay.
And so they'll say, right, here's God, Father, Son, and Spirit. That's not our starting point. What we need to do is dig down to get to, say, the essence, the fundament, there's something under them.
Okay.
And if we dig under them, we'll get to this thing that is the foundation bedrock of what a God is.
Okay.
Like a divine essence.
Yeah.
And then then we'll try and define what that is.
Yeah.
And then we can build on that the three persons and try and fit them. And so it's like what they do is like the Bible never does that. The Bible never goes, Jesus doesn't go, okay, this is how you should pray. Try to imagine an omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient essence that nobody talks like that, and least of all Jesus. The reason why that's a problem, because it's like that problem of saying, if we're going to understand the stars, let's like try to abstract down to what are they made of and how do they move and things like that. Like we can get to, and it's like no, don't do that. You might get to a correct description of it provisionally, but you don't know the truth. With the living God, like we're not going to be able to do that. What is the composition of the divine persons? We're not going to be like, well, this is what they're made of. I mean, the absurdity of that, or this is the regular patterns of divine persons or something. Of course, that's absolutely absurd.
And because the abstract categories, you're trying to make those primary. You're trying to make those a reality.
Yeah, try to say that's the reality.
The real.
The real is that.
And then there's a kind of second.
Then secondarily, let's talk about these three who were made of that stuff.
Okay.
Now I'm saying that's absurd. We have no way of being able to work out what they're made of, or like what is the essence of them, or what makes them divine. I'm like, well, what are you talking about, you fool? Like, how does Jesus define his divinity? He just goes, oh, well, I'm sent from the Father. I'm the Father's son.
Yeah.
And then for him, that's what makes me divine.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't go, oh well, I'm made of a divine stuff.
Yeah.
Like what an absurd thing. So I'm saying it's impossible. It's an impossible task to work out, like to try dig down to the divine essence. Yeah. Like and our Eastern Christians, like the Oriental Orthodox things and they're always like, what an absurd thing to do. Don't even ask the question is blasphemous, let alone to try and answer it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's impossible and also undesirable. Is it even desirable to try and work that out? But is it not more truthful to just say, well, here are these three, and it's Father, Son, Spirit, and that's automatically what I would call mythological language.
Right, because there's a relationship.
It's family, and it's that sort of thing. And that's why Proverbs 30, verse 4, why have I written Proverbs 30, verse 4? That's probably relevant. I better look it up quickly, because I underlined it.
Are we in, is this the woman of noble character, the wife of noble character? No.
No, it's this one. No. It's that Agor guy, and he says, and I've got King James here because it's the original. Let's
Go on.
Who hath ascended up into heaven or descended? Who hath gathered the wind in his fists? Who hath bound the waters in a garment? Who hath established all the ends of the earth? What is his name, and what is his son's name? Can you tell?
Well, of course, that's just poetic language. We've got to get behind that, haven't we?
You cannot say just poetic anyway. The word, but it's like that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's what people do. They go, "Well, that's not serious." I'm saying, no, that's utterly serious.
That's the most true. That's the real.
That's the real. Where he's like saying, let's stop mucking about, right? Yeah. Who is the one who does all these things and use mythological language to describe like the sun, the moon, the stars, the weather, and what is his son's name? As if now we're not mucking about. We're getting right to the heart.
And go to the garment bit. So it starts off with the ascended, descended.
Yes.
Right? So one of the challenges people are going to have, and I think maybe, to put this back, is that the ascending, descending thing feels like, there's now this there's this place.
Yeah, totally.
And then, there's this character who's going up and down. So you've got this protagonist who's going to be going on a little journey up and down, back and forward, all this sort of stuff, right? And he's good. He's wrapped stuff up in a garment, so he's got things. He's like, there's objects, and as you say, it's like it's really mythological.
Yeah, it's a story with a hero.
So the thing I'm most excited about, sort of studying more in the next couple of years, is how the Apostles' Creed, particularly the middle bit about the Son, is the origin, as you were saying earlier, of the hero's journey, which is the Joseph Campbell idea that he talks about in. So he's not a Christian, but he wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and really trying to show people how what the Jungian, like Peter said, what those guys recognize as being, there's a story out there.
There is a story.
And there's some archetypal things, and there's like some tropes that keep coming up, and you're like, that seems to work. And we've got these steps and the journey, and they cross a threshold and all that sort of stuff. And to say that when we talk about Christ, who is conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, and so on, as he goes on his journey, that is both origin and fulfillment of this monomyth, this true one mythos. But and again, to go back to Lewis, he's got an essay, Myth Became Fact, where he says the myths usually take place in this nowhere land and nowhere time, but the fact that it happens under Pontius Pilate, Pontius Pilate's included in the Apostles' Creed, which is weird because he wasn't and he was the guy we started with his what is truth and stuff. It's like, he's here, like the real is right in front of you.
And that's why Lessing's freaked out, because he's like, I could cope with a Jordan Peterson archetype thing. This is something that seems to be generally true. And no, it's not a general truth. It's a historical truth that is projected onto the universe by him. And that's the freaky thing. It's like this guy lives this life, and it turns out that life somehow is written into the entire universe prior to him living it, like from the very foundation of the universe itself. This guy's story is already present in all things. And that if it is a general truth, it's general because it was first particular. It was first particular and then projected from him to all things. So that's why, God the Father, from whom all fatherhood comes. That's the Bible uses that example. And that's that weird thing where people like Jordan Peterson and other. I mean, he's a great guy and everything. I'm not wanting to troll him too much, but I'm just saying, God, he'd do a lot better if he just got wised up to Jesus a bit. But it's the that thing is like, he's always going on about, there's this thing about people's relationship to a father-child stuff is primal. And I'm like, like even before the universe begins, it's kind of primal. And that this issue of father-son relationship is unbelievably primal, much more than you think. And he thinks, it's so primal because all humans deal with it. And I'm like, no, it's more primal than that. It's like everything in the universe orbits around a father-son relationship by the power of the Spirit. You know what I mean? And I always think he needs to go further. So when people like that mythological, why? I know the word mythology. Yeah, you're right. People struggle with it because they're like myth busters, like falsehood busters. No, mythos is like maybe like it's this way of talk. It's describing. I think really, it's kind of describing reality as it really is, rather than mucking about with abstractions. And it's like in the Bible, Revelation 4 and 5, or Daniel 7, it said, this is what heaven's like. There's a door opens. This is what heaven looks like. And there's a throne. And instead of it going, oh, there's this like supreme being who has all power and thing. The Bible's like, well, yeah, but that's an incredibly weird way of describing. It's like, just don't bother trying to know. Don't try and dig down under what you see. Yeah. It's as if, Daniel, just say what you see. Say what you see. Yeah. So he says, oh, well, there was like this throne and this Ancient of Days, and there were like tons of angels and holy ones, and books are opened, and then there's this Son of Man guy comes forward and gets all this authority and power. That's what I saw. That's the story of what I saw. And it's like, yeah, now just tell that story, because that will actually tell you the truth about everything. Revelation, 4 and 5, it's like, John's like, whoa, well, I was in the Spirit, and then I saw this. This is what I saw. Yeah. And he just tells us what he saw. And there's this throne room, and there's like an emerald rainbow, and there's a throne, and there's some dude on it who's like carnelian, and and things like that. And he says, I'll just tell you what I saw. And what the temptation is to go, yeah, but what is that really? Yeah, what's and he's like, no, that is what it really was. That's what I saw. Yeah. And so that is the reality at the center of it. It is, we want to translate it into some weird abstraction. But is it not interesting? And when Jesus says, when you pray, just go, our Father in heaven. So he's literally saying, I hope you've got exactly that image that John or Daniel has given you, or that Moses gave you in the tabernacle. Just literally have that as a little kid would. And if you said to a kid, could you draw the Father in heaven? He'd pretty much draw some sort of like, well, here's a throne, and let's have an old man on it or something like that.
That's one of the things.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, because people often will talk about, people get stuck on the signs, so they'll be like, it's the road sign that says London is like 100 miles this way. Right. And they go, imagine how stupid it would be if you got to the road sign and you went, oh, this is where it's like, this isn't London. This is just the road sign to London. Yeah. But what we're talking about is that if you were in the middle of London.
Yes.
And you're literally right there going, this is a sign. It's pointing me to I can see Big Ben right there. And there's Thames, the Thames, the London Eye, and then a bit further down there's St Paul's Cathedral. But when will we get to London? True London.
That's right.
London. You're like, right. No, you're in London.
You're in it. This is it. That's it. So that's exactly, Nate, you nailed it. That's it. And John's like, no, this is God. There's the Father. Here's the Son. There's the Spirit. That's God. That's God. And Jesus is like, now think of that every time you pray, and don't try to go, but what is it really? No. That's it, really. And it's like, and it turns out real truth is kind of described in the Bible, personal, relational, family, even geographical language. Even the geography of a universe that has structure and upness and downness, as you would say. And it's like that. And I don't know what you make of this. Like, one of the things we know is, like, if you go, God is omnipotent, or he has all power infinitely, you go, okay, that sounds quite powerful. But if instead you describe what is in Revelation, and you go, there's this guy on the throne, and there's emeralds and lights and angels, and there's this choir singing these songs, and worthy is the Lamb, and all things by his will, and all that, you come away, that's powerful. Yeah. Much more than that silly language of abstraction. And that's because
it's show not tell. And if someone was to say, Lionel Messi is statistically the best football player that there's ever been, and he actually he's won all of this number of trophies, which is a really significant number. He's very, very, very good. Many people would say he's the greatest of all time. And it's like, why don't you actually show me some of his goals? Let me go and watch him play. And then I might come away going, now I'd actually like to learn some of the facts about him, and to be able to recall some of the goals, because it's been displayed in front of me. Yeah. It's actually been kind of a reality that I've been able to see and I've been able to engage with, rather than it's just a set of propositions about the, because I often think about it as when it comes to philosophy, I'm not very good at philosophy, partly because I can't think about the abstract. I have to think of the images, or I have to think of the specific things. And so when I'm confronted with a thing or an object or a person, a thing that then I can engage with it. I feel as though
that's real.
I can kind of cope with that. Whereas if I'm just being asked to consider some abstract nouns, like time, you could tell me about time, but if I'm late for a train, like that, then I'm aware of time. Like I know what time is. And again, Lewis goes into this in Myth Became Fact, where he's like, the human mind is like, can be abstract, but the concrete realities is what we confront. We can confront, pleasure and pain and this dog and that sort of stuff. We can deal with that because it is a thing that presents itself to us, is shown to us. Yeah. And that's how we engage with it, rather than you should really just try and wrap your rational
that's
brain
nonsense, isn't it?
about these real concepts, which aren't, all the images of them are just kind of. Yeah.
No, I'm 100% with you, and that's why the Bible says, "No, if you were to see into heaven now, this is what it really looks like." Yeah. And there's the Father. Yeah. And and you will be able to see the Father completely. Well, blessed are the pure in heart, says Jesus. You will see him. Yeah. Like eventually, you're just going to see all this, but for now, here's just a few little images to keep you going, kind of thing. But think of that. Don't try to go beyond them or beneath them. You don't know what you're talking about. Two, there is nothing, but this is it. There is nothing beneath the Father, Son, and Spirit. This is actual reality. Yeah. And if you could go to that highest level of reality, that's what you'll see. I think us trying to be clever, we're actually become thick. Like really thick and don't have as good a it's much more awe-inspiring to take the mythological picture of God, like that story, geography, happenings, comings and goings, characters. That is much more awe-inspiring than mucking about trying to dig under that. And so there's nothing there. There is nothing under this.
The further you dig, the further away you're going to be forever getting to.
That's the only distances away. Away, not deeper. Yeah. And that's why if you really want to be overwhelmed by Jesus, just read the stories about him. There's nothing so moving and overpowering as that. And almost in a way that I think when God shows just how much of a God he is actually really at the cross, and it's something very concrete. And he says, like, all these other gods wouldn't dare go into death, but I'm gonna. Yeah. And when you watch me die, then you'll know I'm the real deal. Yeah. And it's like nothing makes me think of the power and wonder and wisdom of God as watching him die. In weakness and shame and God-forsakenness. Yeah. I can't get my head around that. Nah, no one can.
Even the very things of, so we only really ever focus on them on like Good Friday. Yeah. But you think like the crown of thorns.
Exactly.
Like crown. And again, with in story, you have objects and you have wardrobe and you have costume and you have there are things that are there. And so just the simple, fact that there is a crown made of thorns that is placed on Jesus' head is itself way more useful to me as a Christian than half the books on, systematic theology that I've ever read, because I'm like, no, it's a crown that goes on your head. And that's usually something you are you're coronated, you are crowned, and that's a thing that only really happens to the person by someone else, is like crowning them. And now that person is wearing the crown, whereas previously they weren't wearing it. So a thing happened where the crown was put on, and it's such a basic action, and it's such a basic change that you've got a hat on or you haven't got a hat on, you put it on, and a thing happens there. And even just the simplicity of, I think the crown, something like the crown of thorns for me, it's just so vital to know that's the mythos, the myth that is fact, that is history, that's found its point, in that moment of Christ being crowned with the crown of thorns and then put on the cross. That is so essential. And I don't want to try and get behind that.
There is nothing behind it. That is it. Yeah.
Oh, actually, the thorns...
It's illustrative of something. So no. Before it ever tells us anything else, it is itself the fundamental truth.
Yeah. And there's thorns because it's pointed back to all the things. There's thorns everywhere, and there's a whole thing. But it's a crown because it's so the real crown of thorns, and sometimes brilliant. I don't know if you find this helpful, but pausing and focusing on particular details like that, we just did with the crown of thorns,
100%,
rather than just a kind of the whole thing is just Jesus dies and rises again. And saying, let's look at the crown of thorns. Let's look at the stone.
Because we're taking the story seriously.
Because that matters.
Particularities matter.
Yeah.
The details of the story
really,
are full of import. Yeah.
And I can cope with that as a because I'm not very as good with just thinking in the abstract categories. This might not be relevant, but I was chatting to a friend the other day who was talking about how he uses coins with his children, even though, obviously a lot of the stuff we do is cashless society. I hate it. But the coins thing's really helpful because his kids can deal with a coin. Like, this one's £1. It's a whole £1. And then we're going to go shopping and we're going to go and spend probably a whole £1. And then sometimes we have to go and spend 100 of them.
And that's like,
and they're like, oh my goodness, that's so many pounds. It's like, imagine if you had
pounds.
It's got a value and a significance, which if I'm just told something costs £100, I'm like,
cashlessly it means nothing.
It doesn't.
But if you're carrying it, it means a lot.
It's huge.
That's very powerful. And the Bible, I think we're designed to think in concrete things and visuals. And that actually, you say you're not good at abstract thinking. No, actually, I don't think anybody is actually, but some people think they are. and it actually damages them. So, honestly, Nate, thanks so much for this. We've actually used up our time and it's been amazing. Reformed Mythologist, for those listeners of the Christ-Centered Cosmic Civilization. Maybe one day we can have Nate again because he's an infinite resource of wonders, isn't he? Hope you'll listen in next time.